Welcome back to Stage Dive. Here we are at season 3. It's been a magical slate of interviews for this season. We have an intimacy coordinator, we have a singer who's blowing up on TikTok, we have dancers, we have photographers, we have stand-up comedians, so many different kinds of performances, so many different kinds of humans. I loved making this season and I hope you enjoy it. My next guest is LD Madera, an improviser, a comedian, and a storyteller coming out of Florida. I love this episode in particular because LD has made the very brave, and in my case, potentially not smart decision to do a solo show, which is an unbelievable amount of pressure to put on oneself to entertain people with no music, no other accompaniment, just you and your stories for the better part of an hour. We talk about how to manage that pressure, how you put a show together, what it feels like to really be in flow when you're performing. This is someone who's dedicated years and years of his life to just enjoying being on stage, and it was such a good reminder of how important that is in this whole process. So if you're interested in solo shows or plays or improvising, this is an amazing episode for you. Here is my conversation with LD. So my first question for you, can you tell me about the Mickey gloves behind you?
Well, they were actually a gift. I think they may have been a gift from my wife. My wife and I are huge, big Disney fans. We love the movies. We go to the parks often. We're only about a 3-hour drive away from Walt Disney World in Orlando.
Nice.
So yeah, I don't remember where those specific gloves came from, but most likely they were a gift from my wife.
Cool. And like, were you both pre-existing Disney fans and then you found each other in Disney fandom? Like, did one person have it more strong than the other? Like, how is that interwoven with your relationship?
I think I was a lot more into it than she was. She was into it, but probably not to the level that I was. I grew up in Miami, and now I live in what's called Broward County. And so, of course, as a kid, my mom took me to Orlando a lot, to Walt Disney World a lot. And so when I met my wife, I shared this aspect of my life with her, and she was very intrigued, and she's since hopped on board the Disney train with me.
Amazing. Do you have a favorite movie or character that is closest to your heart?
Oh gosh, I would have to say Stitch.
You have to tell me more because that's not an answer I was expecting.
Yeah. I like Stitch. He's a different kind of character. He's not what I guess you would consider the one of the clean cut characters. He's
For sure.
yeah, he's mischievous. He gets into trouble, but at the same time, he's also really cute.
He is. He's very adorable. I have a 5-year-old, so I am deep in the Disney canon right now. We're in that era of life, and candidly, it has been not a hardship at all. I have no trouble watching those movies.
Wonderful.
But Lilo and Stitch kind of came out of nowhere. My daughter just sort of picked it off the screen one day, and I either hadn't seen it or hadn't seen it in so long that I completely forgot. And there's a lot of wonderful stuff happening in that movie that when you look back at it, feels like it was very ahead of its time.
It really was. And the character, I think, was ahead of its time also.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if you look at the Disney characters back then, the hero was always the clean cut good guy. And now
Right.
here's Lilo and Stitch, and your hero is not necessarily a good guy, but then again, not so bad either.
Right, right. And there was a complicated family situation. There was tension. Like if you know, I know that there's always drama in Disney movies, but this one actually
Mhm.
felt like a more relatable human experience of drama rather than like, oh no, the crown is missing or you know whatever
Right, right.
whatever it is. Um, that's so fascinating. I love that. So you wear many hats. I think as artists today, you don't necessarily have a choice, but I'm always curious as to what within that choice you sort of choose to pursue. So, how would you sort of describe the basic categories of the different things that you're doing right now?
Well, I am at a point where I want to try as much as I can. Um, 2020 was an interesting year for me because something happened that I didn't expect. And when it did happen, I was not prepared for it.
Mm,
I turned 40.
tough.
So, yeah. And
The old double whammy.
exactly. And my birthday is in April. So, of course, in April 2020,
Oh
we
my
were also
gosh.
well into the pandemic, you
Yes.
know. So, my wife said that she had like a really big surprise party planned for me. But of course, that all had to get canceled, you know, and
Right.
so did the entire world. But I
Right.
remember waking up that morning and having this feeling of, wow, I'm 40
40.
right now. Like half of my life and whatever's left of it is gone already. And so I started to think of, the fear of getting into my 60s and 70s and 80s, if I make it that long, and asking the question, what if? What if I
Mm.
had actually took the time that I had to really try to do something? So now I'm at a point in my life where I want to try as much as I can. So I'm trying as much as I can to develop myself in improv. I'm trying as best as I can to develop my own solo improv show. I'm trying as best as I can to develop myself as a magician. I've recently jumped into the world of podcasting because I thought that's an interesting thing. I'd like to give that a try. I have two YouTube channels because I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me give that a try. So I like to try all the things that give me an opportunity to create so I could somehow leave my mark in the world somehow. And maybe it'll all go somewhere, but even if it doesn't, I will at least be able to look back and say, you know what? At least I gave it a shot. And that's
Yeah.
something I feel I could be proud of.
Amazing. I'm immediately finding parallels within our stories, but I have to ask many questions. So, did you have any experience with any of those different mediums before the pandemic started?
Well, magic was something I had been into literally my entire life. I was 5 years old when I first got into it.
Okay.
And the quick story on that was my mother took me to see David Copperfield at the James L. Knight Center in downtown Miami. And this was
Cool.
1985. So this was when Copperfield was becoming very big. And my mom was a really big fan of his. At that time, I had never seen a magician before. And to give some context, my mother tried to introduce me to things like plays and concerts and things like that because she really wanted me to have some sort of culture in my life.
Yeah.
And she wanted me to enjoy all the things that she loved as well. The thing that she didn't factor into all this is the fact that I was five and I didn't really care about all this stuff. So she would take me to a play or a concert by a well renowned pianist or something like that. And within 10 minutes, I'd be fidgety and I'd be saying, Mom, can we go home? Mom, can we go home? And a
Totally.
lot of times we left those shows because I was getting so annoying. And so my mom decided, okay, he's never been to a magic show before. I'm gonna take a chance, and if this doesn't work out, then I'm just giving up on this kid. So we went to the show, and it was my first time ever seeing a magician, and my mom was stunned because she saw that I was actually sitting still and
Right.
actually paying attention.
Yes.
And I was just like, wow, what is this? And David Copperfield won my heart that day. And um, I've since realized that this is something that I really want to do. So I started pursuing magic, and that also led me to wanting to become a performer. I eventually joined Just the Funny, which is an improv theater here in Miami. I started with that theater in 2004, and I've learned along the way. Next year will actually be 20 years during my time at that theater. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And improv has really been a very exciting ride for me. There's so much that I've learned. There's so much that I've picked up on, and so many experiences that I've gotten to have with some amazing people. And it's been quite a ride. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, start to like paint the map as I see it start to form. So you're 5 years old. Your mom, totally understandable, wants to expose you to many things. As the father of a 5 year old, I have also learned that lesson many times of like ice cream, playgrounds. That's sort of the list. Like beyond that, there's not a whole lot of interest to sit still. But you went to this magic show, and something about it, or I imagine many things about it, had you wrapped, and you were just dead set in it. And that was kind of like the first aha of like, ooh, this is something I want to continue to be curious about and explore.
Absolutely.
That sets you up to have an inclination toward performance because, of course, like doing magic by yourself, I imagine there's some joy in, but the real joy is seeing the reaction and the interaction with people. So that leads you to improv at the theater. Remind me the name. Sorry, one more time.
Just the Funny.
Just the Funny. Thank you. Down in Miami, which you will have been a part of for almost 20 years, which is incredible. So, like, we'll get to pandemic and all the cool shit you've started experimenting with since. That's a long time in improv, and anytime I get the opportunity to speak to someone who's been pursuing a craft for a long time, I love to hear when you were first starting, what do you feel like were the biggest things that you were working on? What were the biggest challenges you were overcoming? And now, as you look to years 17, 18, 19, 20, how do you feel like you are now focusing on refining your craft and continuing to explore the medium, in this case, improv?
When I started in improv, I went into it with kind of a one track mind, meaning that I understood it as just something that you did to make people laugh. I only saw it at the time
Got it.
as a comedic venue. And of course,
Mm.
granted, the name of the theater is Just the Funny. And it's funny, our founder, one of our founders, his name is David Christopher. To this day, he keeps saying, God, I really hate our name. But I went into it thinking that my job was to make people laugh.
Yeah.
And my job was to do funny, weird, quirky things to make an audience laugh and share that experience with these people that are on stage with me. And then I had this amazing experience that happened a couple of months later. At Just the Funny, we have a festival that we do called the Miami Improv Festival that we run every year. And there are various improvisers and acts from all over the country, all over the world that come and perform at our festival. And one show that I saw was this duo with these two wonderful improvisers called Mark Sutton and Stacy Halal. And that was the show that forever changed me completely. They did three scenes in that duo show. The first scene was absolutely hilarious. The third scene, again, even more hilarious. And the audience is just roaring with laughter. But the second scene was the one that really impacted me. And I'll never forget it. They did a scene about a cop who was visiting a woman to break the news that her daughter was killed. And as the scene progressed, it becomes discovered that it was actually the cop that killed the daughter. Now, Mark and Stacy are two very talented performers. And if they wanted to, at any point in time, they would have done something to put some sort of comedic spin on that scene and kind of ease the tension for the audience and make some sort of joke out of it. But to my utter complete surprise, they actually didn't. Instead, they honored the reality of what they had created. There wasn't even anything that was said that was accidentally funny. You know how you don't mean it to be funny, but you just say something because
A
that's your truth in
throwaway,
that
sure.
moment. Exactly. And it just happens to get a laugh when you don't expect it. But not even that happened. But even though they weren't getting laughs, the audience was on the edge of their seats, including myself. And I
Mm.
remember watching this and thinking to myself, wow, wow, I had no idea improv could be this. And I just remember having this very strong feeling of, wow, I want to do that. I want to do more of
Mm.
that. And since then, I've actually done away with the need of trying to be funny in my scenes. And what I have learned now is that improv is not just about getting up on stage and making people laugh. Laughs are great. You know, we all love laughter from a crowd, but it's about celebrating a moment that I get to share with someone that I'm on stage with. It's
Mm.
about living in this actual thing that's happening and will never happen again, ever, at any point in time. And it's just for these group of people that are watching. And it's the only time they get to see it. And we get to celebrate this wonderful, magical moment that's happening. And so I approach my scenes that way. I approach my scenes from a spirit of truth, meaning
Mm.
that I don't come in with any sort of premise or idea or, hey, what's a pop culture reference I can pull out of my head? I instead approach it with, here I am, here you are. Let's experience something together. And some of my favorite reactions that I've gotten from an audience haven't always been laughs. You know, just hearing stuff like "aw" or even gasps, or
Mm.
sometimes even when you're not hearing anything, knowing that the audience is sharing in this moment with you, and that I find very, very thrilling.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful answer. Thank you. Um, I want to go back to that duo. So for that second scene, was that something they cultivated for the crowd? Was that like, how did they arrive at, because like the storyline is objectively brilliant. And you can see exactly how you start to paint the picture over time. And like in my mind's eye, I feel like I can see so much of that. But where did the idea come from?
Well, they developed their own format that they actually still do to this day. It's a format that they call a comedy, a tragedy, and a romance. And I think the setup of that is they've noticed that in life we always have a comedy, a tragedy, and a romance. So their second scene was built as a tragedy. But did they know that that's what the premise was going to be? Absolutely not.
Right.
You know, they just went into it. They just looked at each other and they felt something and it just happened. It just came out. And that's where I think some of the best improv scenes, that's when I feel like a lot of the improv scenes are really, really special. That's what really makes an improv scene special. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that we have no idea what's about to happen. And then by the end of the scene, we can look back and say, wow, that happened. And sometimes there there are times where I've done a scene and I still don't understand what happened or what that scene was about.
Yeah.
I remember a scene with a fellow cast member named Alex, and we didn't say anything to each other. We were just rolling around the floor making noises, and it was great. We loved it. The audience loved it. And then after the scene was over, Alex and I turned to each other and we were like, "What the hell was that about?" I don't know, but it felt like fun, and it was really special. So yeah, I love being able to share a special moment. And they don't happen if I come into a scene thinking, okay, I'm going to come in with this idea, and this person's going to say that, and then the audience is going to react to that, and then that'll be
Right.
my cue, blah, blah, blah. Because I don't want to get up on stage and do math. You know, I'm not there to do math.
Yeah.
I'm there to play, and
Yes.
I'm there to feel.
Yes. 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 Um, that all makes very good sense. And I think another thing to quickly rewind to the comedy, tragedy, romance, that means ostensibly it's possible that during that scene, one of the performers was also finding out that the cop was the one who killed the daughter in real time on stage in front of the entire audience, which means the emotion is real, the reaction is real, the surprise is real. Like, yeah, I mean, that's in some ways that's art in its highest form. That's beautiful. Um, I have a curiosity, and like I had not thought about until you mentioned this. So like if you've been at this theater for 20 years, I imagine you've had a lot of opportunity to perform with some actors many times over. And I can see how familiarity could really be a boon because you start to learn each other's tendencies, you know where the yes and can come from, where there's strengths and weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. And I imagine there's a lot of beauty to that. But ooh man, I imagine also when you're if you're improvising with someone you've never worked with before, I could see like an enhanced, almost spidey sense of presence of like, I really need to key into this person because I have no idea what their tendencies are. I have no idea where they're going. Like, I'd love for you to just sort of speak to the difference between performing with someone you've performed with tens, hundreds, thousands of times versus someone you've done this for 15 years, they've done it for many years, but you've never shared a stage or a scene together.
Well, obviously, there's some difference. If I'm performing with someone who I've done like over 100 shows with, then of course I have a good sense of, in general, what tendencies do they have and where they tend to go.
Right.
When I perform with a brand new person for the first time, it's really an opportunity for me to get to learn. It's an opportunity
Mm,
to get to understand this person's. I love performing with new people. I absolutely do, because it just adds to the thrill of the unknown.
right.
And you're someone I've never performed with. Let's see what we can create together. You know, let's see what happens when our two worlds collide together. um, I love the opportunity to perform with anybody at any time. And I don't really have any preference whether you are a beginner or whether you're experienced. Experience is just more shows.
Yes.
That's all it is to me.
Yes.
And if you're here with me and this is our very first time meeting together, then I can promise you that I'm going to listen to you, and whatever gift you give me, I'm going to celebrate it and nurture it and give that gift right back to you.
Mm,
And there are times where I'll perform with someone new and I'll be like, I'm not sure if I want to do a scene with that person again, which hasn't been a lot. It really hasn't been a lot. But I love the opportunity to meet new people, and I love the opportunity to experience a moment with someone new. You know, I get to learn about them, they get to learn about me. And making that new connection is one of the ways that improv is a very beautiful thing.
for sure.
And well, here's someone standing over here. What's your name? David, you took a while to think about that. David, would you like to help me out? Sure. Good. Go ahead and stand right over here to my left, and let's give David a big round of applause. All right. Let's go ahead and touch the back of any one of these cards. That one. Now, are you very happy with that one? You're absolutely certain. All right. Go ahead and slide that card out. Slide it out. It'll happen eventually. There you go, David. Go ahead and pick up that card. Go ahead and show it around to everyone. Give everyone a good view of that card. Again, don't say it out loud. Take this pen and just sign your name across the face of the card. That way we know that that really is your card and not a duplicate. All right, David, watch very carefully. I'm going to go ahead and put your card on top of the deck. I'm going to lose your card by giving it a few cuts, just like that. That's a few cuts there. Let's do a few more, and just a few more, just for added security. Great. I'm not going to change the order of the cards. I'm going to leave them in whatever order they are. They're in an order I don't know, but David, we're going to go ahead and spell your first name. All right? As impossible as this sounds, check this out. David, D-A-V-I-D, and David is this, your card. Of course it isn't. You know why? It doesn't have your signature. Okay. David, let me ask you something. What's your last name? Lugo. L-U-G-O. L-U-G-O? All right, not a lot of letters, but we'll work with it. All right, Lugo, here we go. L-U-G-O, and David is this your card? Of course not, because that would be easy. How about one of these three? It's got to be one of these three. You sure it's not one of these? You don't see a signature here? Okay, how about one of these three here? It's got to be one of these three. Seriously, is it one of these three? Work with me, David! All right, how about one of these four? It's got to be one of these four. You see it? Come on, David. It's one of these four. It has to be. All right, so we're down to one card. Now, I actually would prefer to turn this negative into a positive. Because if I turn this card over, and it is your card, we just wasted a whole lot of time. But then again, if I turn this card over, and it's not your card, that can only mean one thing. It means that your card has vanished from the deck. So David, I'm actually hoping I don't get this, is this your card? Which means David's card has disappeared. So of course now comes the question, where is David's card? I don't know. Thank you very much, David. Huh? Where's the card? I don't flaunt your failures in your face, okay?
Another question that occurs to me, like, how aware are you of the audience when you're like on set? Because it feels like you could be completely lost in the scene. And I'm curious, like, how much of your awareness is to the people you're performing for versus to your partners within the scene?
It's not really that much for me. And I think a lot of performers are different, but I don't really focus that much on the audience. And that might sound bad, but I don't really focus on whether or not the audience is laughing. You know, I know that there are a lot of performers who they see that the audience isn't reacting and they kind of panic and they're like, oh, hey, dick joke, you know? So I've seen that happen many times before.
Yeah.
But, you know, I treat the audience like they get to be voyeurs at this moment. You know, they get to be looking through, this window. And right now it's my moment with this person right here. And if I'm focusing on what the audience is doing, I love that they're there and I'm hoping that they're enjoying the experience. But when I'm on stage and those lights are on, I'm not trying to serve the audience in the sense of trying to make them laugh and trying to get something out of them. I'm there to be with someone that I'm with on stage. So I don't want to say I completely block them out or ignore them completely, but my focus all goes to the person that I'm on stage with.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't have a moment of joy when I hear the audience react. I feel like my most favorite moments in improv is when I say or do something just because that's my character's truth at that moment, and it gets a great reaction from the audience, whether it's a laugh or whether it's an applause or something. And there's that little second where I go, "Oh, really? They like that? Oh, I didn't expect that."
Yeah.
It's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Um, at the risk of putting you on the spot, either what is the worst show you recall doing, or is there a particular memory where you're like, that did not go the way that I hoped it might have gone?
Oh gosh, how much time we have for this
Yeah.
podcast? I mean, obviously, I've had not so great moments on stage. Just trying to think of one off the spot. Well, I think anytime I've entered a stage saying something that I think is going to be funny, 10 times out of 10, it doesn't end up getting a laugh at all. And I've learned so much. And when I teach students, they kind of learn that the hard way. You know, they think, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to say the funniest damn thing that's just going to make the audience crack up. And then they go on that stage and they say it, and of course, crickets. I think that's definitely a learning experience that I've had. Um, I do have one vivid memory, and I don't know if it's because of something I did that was wrong, but this was a couple of years ago, and we had within the audience a group of young college kids, and they had must come from some party or something like that, because one of the kids was this girl who was clearly drunk, and she was a rowdy type of drunk. And when the show began, we're all on stage and just doing our opening piece. And of course, the girls shouting and being very loud. The audience is getting annoyed. Her friends are completely embarrassed and kind of just like hiding themselves because they're totally embarrassed. So then we get through the first piece, and then there's a blackout. I go up on stage because on the lineup I'm supposed to call the next piece. So I step out into the darkness on stage, and then I feel something on my left side, and I'm like, what is that? The lights come back on, and that drunk girl is now standing right next to me on stage, and she's grabbing my arm and she's saying to her friends, "Hey, look, guys, I'm funnier than that guy, and I'm funnier than that guy." And I just kind of froze up, and I'm like, what is happening? And this is when I was still new, so I didn't really have a good handle on what to do in situations like that. And of course, her friends came up, and they literally had to drag her off the stage, and they left. They all walked out of the theater dragging their friend, and as they're walking out, they're saying to the audience, "We're so sorry. We're so sorry." So that I'll definitely never forget. But yeah, they're it's hard for me to remember scenes a lot of times unless someone has videotaped it, because every moment is so different and you're experiencing different moments every single time. But yeah, there's definitely been moments where I think something's going to go one way, and it doesn't, and it doesn't end up too well. Yeah, I think we've all had those experiences.
For sure, for sure. Um, are there types of characters that you find yourself gravitating toward?
Hmm, that is interesting. I try very hard not to make every character sound like me a
Sure.
lot. I do try to give myself that challenge. But I like to have variety in my characters. I've done very strong characters. I've done very weak characters. I've played children. I've played very older people. On many occasions, I've played a young Southern debutante lady. Don't know why that came up a few times. Um, we used to have this game that we would play that we called the Love Machine, and it was uh, the best way to describe it is an improvised dating game where we get someone from the audience to be the contestant. And so she's got these three bachelors, us in the cast, who come out as these characters that she has to pick a date from. And of course, we're coming in with these outlandish characters. And I created a character named David Magnifico, who was, surprise, surprise, a magician, but a very horrible and overly cheesy magician. And rather than doing like really good tricks, I'm just doing um, very simple third grade tricks, but with a whole lot of drama. That was the big pitch of my character. Like I would take that whole rubber pencil trick, but I'm being very dramatic about it and really doing all my big hand. I was basically trying to do someone who wanted to copy David Copperfield. That's what David Magnifico was.
Right.
That's been a fun character. But yeah, I like to have as many varieties of character as I can.
Yeah, of course. That's amazing. Um, so transitioning a little bit, this will be like my segue question. Have you noticed changes in audiences or in your fellow scene mates post COVID?
That's a really good question. I would say yes. Pre-COVID, we kind of had a tough time. It's always tough to get audiences for such a different type of show, because in South Florida you don't really think of improv. We're not,
Sure.
yeah, we're not Chicago, we're not New York, we're not LA. You think of Miami, you think of the beach and bars and nightclubs.
Yes.
So but I noticed that after the pandemic there was, and probably this is obvious, but there was definitely a lot more of an eagerness for people to go out and experience something.
Yes.
And I think for us, that gave us an opportunity to really satisfy that eagerness and really take that opportunity to really challenge ourselves to produce something that people can really enjoy and really want to come back to see.
Yeah.
And so now, whereas it was tough to get a couple of people in the audiences, now we're having more sold out shows than we've ever had before. We've also done some remodeling in our theater. We used to have standard theater seating. Now, post-COVID, we have tabled seating. And we have nice little QR codes on the table so people can order from the bar and the bartender delivers their drinks to them. And that's been helpful very much. And I think as far as our cast, I mean, we've had a couple of new cast members since COVID, because we're a pretty big cast. We're like close to 40-45 people at this point.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
obviously in different rotations.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think the ones that have been there since COVID definitely have grown a desire to really satisfy the audience and to really thank the audience for coming back. And I think that has really made everyone step up their game a whole lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so wonderful to hear, and how great that the theater is improving and growing and flourishing in this. Like post COVID feels weird to say, because it feels like it's still vaguely like off stage left, like a weird ghost just hanging out in the wings. Sorry, my brain is bubbling questions today. It's just one of those. I would love to hear from you. Like, are there rituals or things that you do before a show, and that could extend to the 30 seconds before lights come up? That could be throughout the entire day, the days leading up. But what do you feel like you need to do to be in the best position possible to deliver the performances that make you really proud?
A lot of drinking. No, I'm kidding.
Infinite liquor is the solution to everything.
And scene. The day that I have a show, I really try to make sure that I have a nice, relaxing day. I don't give myself too much to do. I make sure that I don't have a lot of errands to run. I spend time with my wife and make sure we're having a good day. If my wife and I happen to have an argument that day, I make sure to resolve it with her. And most likely we're arguing because of my screw up, but I just take that time to just apologize and make amends with her. And my wife is a very lovely, forgiving person. Because when I arrive at the theater, I want to be able to walk in good spirits. I mean, everybody has a bad day, but I feel like I'm performing at my best when I'm in a good place that day. So we have warm-ups before a show. The cast, we meet backstage and we go over notes and we go over the lineup. And then we have various warm-ups that we do. For me, I do like a little bit of stretching because I want to get myself physically going and physically ready. And in recent years, I've started giving myself a new philosophy before a show because one thing that I've definitely been working on, and this has kind of been like my new challenge for everything that I do, is I really work hard in lowering the bar in my head. And I think for a lot of us performers, a lot of us who like to create anything, it can be very easy to set the bar really high in our heads, thinking that this is going to be the most amazing thing ever, and everyone's going to be so blown away by what I have to offer. And there's certainly nothing wrong with being motivated. There's certainly nothing wrong with being proud of yourself and being confident in what you do and having a high bar. But for me, I would be the type of person that would set the bar all the way to the top of the Empire State Building. You know, I would set the bar at such a impossibly high level that I knew I could never really reach. So I now tell myself something different before every show. I simply say to myself, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be me. And I found that I perform a lot better when I lower the stakes in my head. Because the truth is, it's not going to be perfect. You know, I mean, you could think about it logically. I mean, how could you do something perfect every time that you're supposed to be making up off the top of your head, right? You know, I'm going to be making mistakes on stage. I'm going to forget someone's name. You know, I'm going to trip up. I'm going to stutter sometimes. You know, I might make a not so great choice. It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. You know, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to do the show as best as I can and do what I like to do on stage. And that's all I can do. And if people appreciate it, that's wonderful. I found that that really takes the pressure off in having to really be good. And, you know, we performers, and I'm sure you have this as well, we all have that feeling of we're in front of an audience and we're always like, please like me, please like me. You know, there's always that thing. But I've learned that, you know, I'm just there to be. I'm just there to be. I'm there to be myself. I'm there to present myself to you all. And it's not perfect, but at least it's me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, was there like a moment when you feel like that realization came home to you, or has that just sort of been like an evolution over time?
Yes, it was actually recently. And I'm going to go back to 2020 so you understand why this was important for me. And this is where this kind of all ties in. In January 2020, before the pandemic,
And long, long ago, yes.
Yeah, way back then when we still had cassette tapes. I got to perform my solo improv show at the Miami Improv Festival. And it was actually the first time I was performing my solo show at any festival at all. So, of course, me being me at the time, I had the bar set really, really high. And I thought, yeah, this is my big breakout moment. And I went out and I did the show. And then afterwards, I actually got really depressed. I got depressed because I felt like that just was not my best. And I know why it wasn't my best, because I psyched myself up too much. And so therefore I wasn't in the right headspace. And, you know, I was very mopey afterwards. And I was very angry at myself, felt like I let myself down. And then, of course, at some point, my wife finally said, what the hell's wrong with you? Why can't you just be proud of what you just accomplished? And here's the thing about wives. They're usually right. That's a good lesson for all you husbands out there. Make sure you remember that. Your wife is right. Don't question it.
The world are cheering.
Exactly. So cut to this year, 2023, and I did the Miami Improv Festival again with my solo show, which is called Together by Myself. And now I kept adopting this new philosophy of it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be me. And that actually felt like the best that show has been so far. And I was creating characters that were very, very connected. I was creating moments that were very special. And at the end of the show, I actually got a standing ovation. And it was my first ever standing ovation. And again, I had that feeling of seeing everyone stand up. And I'm like, oh, wow, they really like that. I wasn't prepared for that. And I don't want to sound like I'm gloating or anything like that, but it's become more evident that if I just remember that it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be me, that's when I perform at my best. It's great to just take the pressure off and know that I am enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what was it like having spent so many years with improv, generally having scene partners, to developing a whole show where you're the only person on stage?
Well, this I developed in 2019, um, but I had actually developed it a couple of years earlier. Well, I saw this wonderful improviser named Jill Bernard, and she was the first person I'd ever seen do solo improv. And I actually had no idea that was even a thing. I'm like, oh, really? You could do this by yourself? You could create your own characters? Huh, that's pretty interesting. So I felt like I would want to give that a try. So I created a solo show a couple of years back. I want to say maybe, gosh, I don't know, maybe 2010, 2011 or so ish. And I went into it with a very improv hippie mentality. I had no structure to it. I'm like, well, hey, it's improv, man. Whatever happens, happens, man. Let's just go with the art, man. And it would basically just end up being me, just kind of like running around on stage, but with really no focus and no emotional truth to anything. So I actually put it on the shelf for a while, and I felt like, well, I need to rethink this a bit. Finally, in 2019, I finally came up with a general format. And it's at that point where I had a better understanding of the type of improv that I like to do, which is improv that is about two characters that are what's called an us of a scene, meaning two characters that are going through a situation. And everything is about these characters' emotional reactions to each other. So I developed it in 2019, and I did it a few times at some of our shows at Just the Funny. Then I've since been taking it on the road, doing it at various festivals. I'll be doing it this August in Tampa at the Countdown Improv Festival, and it's been a very enjoyable ride. And what I'm essentially doing is I'm playing racquetball with myself.
Hmm.
I know what will generally happen. I know that I'm going to toss a ball and hit it with a racket. It's going to hit the wall, then bounce right back to me, and I'm going to repeat that process all over again. But that's the only thing that I actually have control of. I have no idea how that ball is going to come back to me. It might go a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, or maybe just come straight at me, or maybe it'll just go over my head. And so I'm in a constant state of adapting every single time. And I've been working on this principle where I'm trying to surprise myself every single time. Um, we all have that moments where we say something, and then after we say it, we're kind of like shocked that we said it. It happens all the time when we're arguing with someone. I mean, you're with a loved one and you're having a fight, and then you say something, and then you kind of have that moment where you're like, oh boy, I went too far. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Um, I'm from South Florida, so we get this all the time. We have to deal with bad drivers everywhere.
sure.
And so everybody in South Florida knows that feeling of being in their car and then getting cut off. And then, of course, we just start yelling, "You son of a bitch!" And all this stuff starts coming out. And then after you calm down, you're kind of like, "Wow, I'm glad my mother wasn't in the car with me when that happened." So what I'm essentially doing in Together by Myself is, rather than reacting as myself to what I said, I take that moment to quickly switch to the other character and react as that character. And so I make sure that every character is as emotionally different as possible, but I also don't leave both characters where they're at. By the end of the show, you see that there's a change in the characters. And the show actually ends with you seeing monologues from all the characters that you saw and talking about where they're at that moment.
Mm.
It's been a really, really thrilling ride. It's something that I think every improviser should try at least once, because it really gets you in that mode of being honest and being surprised.
Yeah. Like how many characters are you creating over the course of the show? How many monologues are there at the end?
Well, I have it down to six characters. It's three scenes, and it's 2 characters per scene. Because I think that's as much as I'd be able to remember.
For sure.
And at the end, you're seeing a monologue from all 6 of the characters, um, but it goes quickly back and forth. So you hear the monologues like multiple times. So this character speaks, and this character speaks. Then we might hear from this character again. It just kind of goes. It jumps back and forth and back and forth. But it's that moment for the audience to see where the characters are at this moment after they experience what they experienced in that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what has the process of putting on a solo show taught you that you didn't expect to learn?
Hmm. It's okay to be honest,
Mm.
and it's okay to feel. Um, I feel like every show, there's always something that I learn. Um, there are times where I'll have a scene with 2 characters and the scene is silent. I have the 2 characters not saying anything, you know. That happened once, and I'm like, wow, that felt really good. I might like to try that again. But you see what the characters are feeling. I love scenes that are silent. Um, I've learned that as long as my characters are feeling and they don't just sound a certain way, then that's where the really special stuff happens. For me, there's a big difference between playing a character and playing a caricature. A caricature, it's just a funny walk, it's just a funny voice.
Yes.
You know, it's just a two-dimensional character. But a character actually has a third dimension, and that's this. A character feels, and whatever show you watch, whatever movie you watch, whatever TV show you watch, you can watch the most outlandish characters in the world, but you could tell that they are feeling something. Take any Warner Brothers cartoon. Yes, these are weird, silly characters, but they're also feeling.
Mm.
They have emotions running through them. Take Elmer Fudd, for example. You could say that he is motivated by anger. I mean, all these years, and he can't kill this one rabbit. That's really gotta piss you off, I
Yeah.
think. Daffy Duck, he goes through a wide range of emotions. He goes from manic to sad to joyful. Um, so I've definitely learned that it's always important to feel and feel big. I've also learned that it's okay to take my time. You know, the audience is right along there with me for this ride, and I don't have to hurry to something. I can just take my time and just be in that moment, and let the moment take me wherever it wants to take me. So I feel like there's always a great lesson that I learn every time I do this, and it's always a lesson that I feel makes me better, and I feel like it's a great celebration between me and the audience.
Yeah, 1,000%. Is your sense that like you would like to keep growing the show and doing it at more and more festivals and like take it around the country? Like, is there a future for it, or is it like I feel like improv there's tension around like just being present to the moment of what is in front of you. But again, as artists, it's like, okay, where's my next show? How am I setting it up? Who do I have to call? Blah 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 blah. So like, where are you in that melange of things that you're doing?
I will do the show wherever anyone asks me to do it. Um, if I were to really dream big, I would love to be able to do the show for a whole 2 hours at like a really nice theater. That would be a really big dream come true. I would love to perform at more festivals and more theaters. I think I have something to share with everyone, and from what I'm seeing, people are really enjoying what I'm doing. So who knows where this goes? I mean, I'm just being very present, and who knows where this will goes. I mean, I hope one day my dreams come true, but for now, I'm just going to enjoy this and just try to do this as much as I can.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
So some of you might know I rap, I make music. That's what I do sort of primarily in addition to this podcast. And for a very long time, I had considered doing an album. I had thought about it, but I had never pulled the trigger. And that has finally changed. My debut album, Integration, is coming out November 2nd of this year, 2023. I'm immensely proud of the project. We have so much fun content with behind the scenes and music videos and visualizers and all kinds of cool shit. So from now until the album releases, you'll see more and more of that stuff coming up on Instagram and TikTok and all of the places. But most importantly, I want you to be there for when the album comes out. So if you're interested, if you're willing, I would love for you to pre-save it, or if you want, you can reach out to me and I can even share some clips of the album with you. I'm, again, so proud of it, and I can't wait to share it with you.
So you've been with this theater for nearly 20 years. The show, it sounds like, is really becoming like your heart center. It's what you love, what you want to do more of, what you want to take. So how would you describe your relationship to the things like coming back to magic, the YouTube channels, the podcast? Like what part of you is being nourished by sort of those? Because it already sounds like you have plenty on your plate.
I do keep myself busy a lot. Going back to magic has really been a special thing for me, because I actually, even before the pandemic, I still did it, but I kind of put it away for a while because I felt like, I had other responsibilities in my life to take care of. But now that I've had this opportunity to jump right back into it, it's been very joyful. It's kind of like a reunion for me. And so I feel like, well, now that I have this opportunity to create something, I'm going to go ahead and just create as much as I can. And I'm learning about new things all the time, like doing a YouTube channel. I see a whole lot of people doing it, and then I just start to think, could I do something like that? Maybe I should give that a try. And then I just do a little research, and I'm like, oh, I could do this for free. Sure, yeah, I'll give this a try. Why not? And now I have a podcast, and again, it goes to, I want, that's something I would like to try. That's something that I would like to give a shot and see if I could make happen. I feel like I'm in a state where there's so many cool things that I want to try, and maybe they'll be great, maybe not, but I love the opportunity to find different ways to create. And I feel like we're at a very wonderful time right now, because we have various ways for artists to create and share with the world.
Yes.
And a lot of these ways you don't even have to spend a lot of money on. Well, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money, but
yes.
But I love the opportunity to discover how else I can create something. Of course, I also try to make sure that I manage my time as well. I don't want to take too much time away from my wife, of course, because my devotion is always going to be to her. But at the same time, she's been amazing. She's been extremely supportive of everything that I'm doing. And in fact, there are times where before I try to get into something, I'll be a little nervous. And it's actually my wife who comes up to me and says, you know what? Yes, you should do it. You're good at this. You'd be good at it. So just do it. So it's great to have a cheerleader behind me to keep me motivated. So, but I love being able to create no matter what it is. And I love being able to share these creations with as many people in the world as I can.
Yeah, 100%. For what it's worth, reflecting back, the podcast, the YouTube channels, the magic, it sounds like it's kind of coming from like inner child. It feels like you're in a toy store and you're like, yeah, of course I want to play with the model plane, and I want a teddy bear, and I want the train set, and like, duh.
Absolutely.
Like, what are you talking about? Of course I want to do all those things. They're awesome. Why would I not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've decided that I refuse to tell myself that I'm getting old. And that is definitely something I started telling myself when I turned 40.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when I turn 50, I'm going to keep telling myself that.
Yes.
And, for every single decade, I'm going to just keep telling myself, no, I'm not old.
Yes.
At least not inside, at least not in my heart. I'm not old. I'm not giving myself permission to feel old.
Yes. Yes. I think that is a wise move for a whole variety of reasons. What's the podcast about?
So this podcast is called Improv and Magic, and it's my opportunity to sit down and talk to people in both worlds that I really admire. And it's an opportunity for me to also get to hear their stories, because there's a lot of people that I've had a chance to perform with and learn from and really admire, but they also have fascinating stories to tell. So I love being able to have the opportunity to sit down and learn where they came from. I like to describe it as my own mini version of Inside the Actor's Studio. And it's been very thrilling to hear what these people have gone through, and a lot of the joys that they've experienced, and a lot of the sadnesses that they've experienced as well, but how all of these things that they've gone through have shaped how they are today. And it's funny, I didn't really realize that till I recorded like the second or third episode of the podcast, because in the beginning I was just like, well, I'm just going to talk to people. I reached out to a fellow cast member and I said to her, hey, I would love for you to be on my podcast. And then she said, oh, great, LD. What's your vision for the podcast? And I said, I don't know. I'm just going to talk to people. But I'm glad she asked that, because now I feel like I do have the proper vision for the podcast, which is
Yes.
hearing everyone's stories and hearing how these wonderful art forms have shaped them, and how they're taking every opportunity they can to share these gifts with the world.
Yes, 1,000%. I don't know if I've ever asked anyone this. Which do you enjoy more, interviewing or being interviewed?
I've never thought about that before. um, I guess I enjoy both for different reasons. I love being interviewed because I love talking about myself. No, that's not true.
Well, it's a little true for all humanity. So, like, you welcome to own it in this space. We all love talking about ourselves, particularly artists who spend a lot of time and energy trying to make things for other people. We want to talk.
Yeah, talk about what you know, right? And that's all I know. Um, I love being able to share my story with people, and I hope that maybe someone gets something out of the stuff I share. And I love interviewing because I love having the opportunity to find out more about people. And I'm sure you must have had this many times where you have some questions planned, but then there are questions that you just end up asking because of what someone said, because someone will say something and it's something that you just want to explore a whole lot more. I love to learn about people, and I love to learn about what makes them tick. So I don't know if I have a preference one or the other, but I think both are quite enjoyable for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, like in some ways, these interviews are always an improv exercise, because I really like You've Fallen Victim. Generally, my move is to ask a question about what's in the background, because everyone in their head is like, he's going to ask my name, he's going to ask blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, Mickey hands. Tell me about him. And immediately people are like, oh, shit. Like, okay, yeah, let me tell you about the Mickey story. And like, I think the amount of content out there demands that we be more thoughtful and creative about how we introduce people into subject matter. So like, yes, that's a nice thing. But also it's a fun challenge for me of not knowing what I'm going to ask until I see the person. And it's like, is it a piece of clothing? Is it something in the background? Is it something I read about their bio? Whatever it is. And like really letting the conversation take shape. Like there is joy in it. And inevitably the conversation winds to places that I would never have been able to navigate it if I had said, these are the 20 questions. This is what I ask. This is the order in which I ask them. So I completely agree with what you're saying. I understand, and it resonates.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same way as well. When I'm interviewing, I actually don't have a list of questions. I have like a few general ones, but then the conversation starts, and then there's a moment where they start talking about something, and I'll be like, "Oh, tell me more about that moment."
Yes.
And just like an improv, we find a moment and we jump on that moment and we celebrate that moment.
Yes. Yeah, 1,000%. This is usually the last question I tend to ask, and there's two ways I can ask it. I always let the person being interviewed decide. So LD, this is up to you. Either what advice would you offer to someone who is curious about jumping into and you can dispense advice on many things, but let's say improv, because that's where you have a deep, deep bench of experience. Alternatively, if you could go back to you 20 years ago before you were starting, and you alluded to this a little bit with the idea of like, it's not necessarily about the laugh. So that is logged. But are there other pieces of advice or other pieces of wisdom you would really want to make sure that you shared with that version of yourself?
Very interesting. So I have to do one or the other, right?
You can do both. I always like to give, because I think some people really like the idea of speaking to younger self. Some people like the idea of dispensing advice. There is not a right or wrong. They're both directionally the same, but to the extent that you see a nuance, I want to answer both. Bring them.
You know, I think I'm going to go ahead and answer both questions at the same time.
Nice.
For to my younger self 20 years ago, and for people interested in jumping into improv, and that is simply yes. Yes, you are capable of doing this. Yes, you are good enough. Yes, the world does want you to do this. And yes, you will be amazing doing it.
Amen. That's a great answer. I love it. LD, this was a joy. Please let people know where they can find you and your show and your podcast and all of the things.
Great. So you can find more information about my solo improv show at togetherbymyself.com. You can also find out about the theater that I perform in, Just the Funny, at our website, justthefunny.com. You can find my podcast called Improv and Magic. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or Apple iTunes, I think is the correct term. You can find me on YouTube, Together by Myself, and LD Madera Magic. Those are my two YouTube channels. I also have another YouTube channel that I've started with my wife called Madera's Magical Adventure, where, surprise, surprise, it's about us at the Disney parks. That's a new one that we've been starting. Cool. You can find me on Instagram, LD_Madera. Also on Instagram, LD Together by Myself. You can find me on MySpace. I think I might still have that out there. I have to look for the password, but I'll search for it. Yep. And yeah, I would love the opportunity to meet people and connect. So if you're out there and I sound like someone you'd want to meet, I'd be happy to meet you.
Cool. LD, this was a joy. Thank you again for your time, for your energy, and for all of the wisdom you shared. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was a blast.
Awesome.
Do you know anyone who you think would make a great guest on this podcast? The good news is there's almost no qualification. They need to be a human and they need to make art. I'm not particularly concerned if they make art for 100,000 people or for no people and they're still doing it in their home. This podcast is all about telling the stories of artists and how their craft has evolved over time, how they perform in their own unique way. So if you have a friend that you love listening to, if you have someone who you think has a really interesting story, I would so love to talk to them. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us at stagedivepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for watching Stage Dive again. My name is Jack Dawkins. It was a pleasure to have you here. Before I sign off, I do want to thank Kalisa Mickle and Holly Johnson for being the hearts, the guts, the brains behind the operations that make this entire podcast possible. They work so hard to continue to improve it and put it in front of more people and allow it to continue to live on. So thank you to them, thank you to our guest, and thank you to you for watching. I appreciate you.